Singapore is tightening measures to further curb the spread of COVID-19. Starting Friday, all entertainment venues, including nightclubs, cinemas and theatres, will be closed, while other public venues like malls and attractions may stay open. Their operating capacity must be reduced, however, and gatherings outside of work and school must not exceed 10 persons. Centre-based tuition and enrichment classes, as well as religious activities, will also be suspended. Singapore residents and long-term pass holders returning from the US and the UK will need to serve their stay-home notices at dedicated hotels instead of at home. Liu Ying with more.
While stringent safe distancing measures have been introduced last week, the government says those measures are not being rolled out fast enough. Now, people are still taking part in social gatherings, especially in places like pubs and bars, which can be very crowded. Because there is some community transmission in Singapore right now, there is a risk that these places could become a cluster or a super spreader event. The government is not closing schools and workplaces for now, and it hopes that the latest slew of measures will work and they avoid that worst-case scenario.
People use the word lockdown very loosely these days, and it means many things to different people. We like to think of our strategies in different categories and based on risk. At the very baseline level, there are things that we ought to do permanently. And even after COVID-19 is over, and it will be over at some stage, we have to maintain these standards. Beyond the baseline, we are talking about a series of measures that can be put in place throughout, or precautionary measures that can be triggered, as we say, additional breaks as and when the need arises.
Now, from Thursday, those returning to Singapore from UK and US will have to serve their stay-home notice in hotels instead of at home. Now, this is because a large number of them are expected to return, and the task force wants to reduce the risk of them spreading the virus to their loved ones if they are infected. To further discourage Singaporeans from travelling, now those who do so despite the travel advisory will have to pay for their own hospital stay if they turn out to have COVID-19. Now, this is to ensure that Singapore's healthcare system does not become overwhelmed with a flood of cases. To prioritise resources for critically ill COVID-19 patients, the government is moving patients who are generally well and do not require significant medical care to a community isolation facility. Now, this is where they can take the time to recover and go home when they are no longer infectious.
CIF is a repurposed government quarantine facility. And we have dedicated this government quarantine facility exclusively for these cases that have been discharged from the hospital. There's no mixing of these people with people that previously had been on quarantine and then being looked after within these. We have a small team from one of our hospitals that has come in to provide with advice to the operators of the facility, to give them also an assurance, to provide them with some backup in terms of what they need to do, make sure that their infection control measures remain robust.
The government will foot the bill for patients in the community isolation facility.
And Vanessa Lim joins us now from Clarke Quay, one of the places where Singaporeans go to enjoy the nightlife. Vanessa, what's the situation like at Clarke Quay right now?
Well, I'm not sure if you can see, but it is relatively quiet here. But that's probably because it's also a Tuesday evening, which is typically not a peak time for the crowds to be coming here. But come Thursday, 11:59 p.m., this place will be quieter as many venues will be closed. Now, this comes as the government announced stricter measures to ensure safe distancing and also to limit gatherings to 10 persons or fewer. Now, this is because venues like nightclubs, theaters, entertainment outlets, they have been deemed as areas that have a high risk of transmission due to sustained close contact over a period of time. Now, the new measures will will kick in on Thursday, 11:59 p.m. and will be in place until the 30th of April. But they might be extended due to depending on the circumstances. Now, but businesses here are already feeling the impact. Some of the businesses that I spoke to say they have seen a drop of up to 75%, and that's because many of their customers are tourists. And with countries issuing travel bans and travel advisories to Singapore, they have been hard hit.
Yeah, Vanessa, tell us a bit more about sort of the club owners and, the owners of establishments there and patrons as well. How are they reacting to these latest measures?
Well, the measures were just announced about 2 hours ago, so there's a lot of uncertainty on the ground. They're not sure what's going to happen to them. Staff here are concerned about their jobs. They're not sure whether this means they don't need to show up, they don't need to turn up at work on Thursday. And I think a lot of them are waiting for Thursday, where Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee-Keat will be giving a ministerial statement where he will talk about additional support given to workers, businesses, and households during the COVID-19 pandemic. But patrons that I spoke to, some of them, they say they've been avoiding Clarke Quay during peak hours, but for some of them, these 2 days would be, a last chance for them to hit these areas.
Just taking a last chance to come here and get a last sip of alcohol before it, closed down for 1 month. So yeah, and it's kind of sad. I have to wait 1 month again before I go back.
Actually, I just heard the news like 2 hours ago, and it's kind of it's a big letdown, but I'm glad the government is doing actions to prevent any more virus from spreading.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. Vanessa Lim speaking to us from Clarke Quay in Singapore.